Blog Talk Radio.
Hello, everybody. This is Sally O'Cordy, and welcome to the Mary and Sally Show, the longest-running radio program dedicated to vaccination information. Today, my guest is Amandha Vollmer. She has a Bachelor of Science and is a naturopath, and about the most brilliant woman I have heard. She's been researching vaccines for 20 years, and she will tell you the truth. I haven't heard anybody express so much truth in such a short period of time, possibly ever. She was brought to my attention by a nurse, Janice Hicks, who I can always rely on for very important information, but this may be the best gift she has given me. So I will pick up my guest, Amandha Vollmer, right now. Hello, is this Amandha Vollmer?
This is. Is this Sally O'Cordy?
It sure is. I'm so enthused to have your message shared with my listeners. I was watching your video, and for the people who are new to Amandha Vollmer, as I was as of yesterday, please go to the comments area below the radio program and watch her video and share her video. It is going to be one of several parts, but it couldn't be more important. The name of this show is called, it's a word I've never heard used, so you may have coined the term scientism. Did you?
No, I didn't. It has been used. It has been used in a few different arenas.
Well, I love it. The name of the show is Scientism, the Cult of Vaccines, and this is Amandha Vollmer. And I really just kind of want to shut up and put myself on mute, so that you can speak ceaselessly for the next 2 hours. You have too much important information to share. So would you mind if I did exactly that?
I don't mind at all. And if
great.
Something you want to interject on anything and want me to expand on something, then by all means unmute yourself.
Well, all I can say is I saw what you put out in an hour and 27 minutes, and I thought, she can't spare a second. You've got too much information, and you want to add additional information about particular vaccines, and I don't want to get in the way of that. So let me mute myself and welcome Amandha Vollmer, Bachelor of Science, naturopath. I want to read the name of your organization, which I have written somewhere. Why don't you tell people the name of your organization and your website, and then embark?
Okay, sounds great, Sally. Thank you very much for inviting me onto your show. It's a really great honor. I feel like it's time for me to speak to these topics that are so important, as I've been researching the topic of vaccines for nearly 2 decades and been aware of, vaccines and their issues even before that. So not that I've been mute, but I've been quiet. I've been studying. I've been compiling and trying to understand what has gone on here with this what I call the cult of vaccines, or also the cult of the medical model and how it's run. So my business is been active for 5 years. It's Yummy Mummy Emporium and Apothecary. And you can find me online at yummymummy.apothecary.com. And if you're interested in my bio, my history a little bit more, you can just click on health, and it'll take you to my bio, and it'll explain, my studies, where I've traveled to, what I've learned. I'm in my 40s. I have, a background in science. I was raised to be aware of my surroundings. I was always very sensitive, very empathic naturally, and I actually wanted to become a veterinarian when I was growing. And so I studied a Bachelor of Science in Agricultural Biotechnology from the University of Lethbridge, which wasn't really my choice, but it was the choice of the administrators that said, well, if you want to go to vet school, this is the closest to the prerequisites that you would need to go. So I went into the biotech world, innocently. So I have a whole bunch of knowledge there as far as why genetically modified organisms are dangerous and exactly how to make them. I was making them in the laboratory myself. So that was interesting, being someone who was very environmentally aware, very holistically minded. I became vegetarian age 17. I was very sensitive to all life. And then here I am in the throes and the bowels of science, seeing and hearing all of these different ideas and all of these very deranged ideas as well. And very curious, and was always well-read and always interested in really understanding the root cause of everything. Why did everything become the way it is and was? I was always very existential, philosophical, and so forth. And my real awakening was from Buckminster Fuller. I read a couple of his books when I was in my youth, and for me, that really was the key. That was the first little notch in my belt that there's something wrong with vaccines. There's something wrong with what's going on in the medical model, and there's something sinister behind it. And I want to get to the root cause, so I want to know what is going on behind the scenes that we're not really seeing or that most people don't see. So I guess that's the occult kind of understanding of it, which just means hidden. And I did go into a lot of metaphysical and occult studies as well to this level of understanding. So when I got out of school, out of my Bachelor of Science, I'd done a lot of work in the lab. I felt very proud of myself at that stage that I had, graduated. I traveled. I did 2 years of traveling. I practiced Buddhism for a couple of years, Tibetan-style Buddhism for a few years. So I was really doing a lot of meditation, a lot of inward work, and, developing myself and also, understanding who I am, who is this soul in a body. So I think that introspective work helped me to become aware and become more balanced and get control of my ego, which I think a lot of people haven't had that, that structure or that training to do that. So then when I went to naturopathic college, which is a 4-year program, I learned a lot, obviously, through the studies, but I also saw the politics within, and I saw that there was other things going on behind the scenes even there that were sinister, that, me being very activist, based, I was, in my youth, I worked for Greenpeace. I did a whole bunch of things politically, big oil and, big banks, and I became aware of the fraud of banking and the central banks and all that kind of thing. And then I started to become very political and very vocal, which rattled a lot of cages, I guess, and ruffled feathers. And that didn't turn out so well, and I'll save that story for another day. But what it taught me was that there's something more happening. There's a controlling arm that's reached into every aspect of our modern medical world, even the holistic structures, a lot of them. And so my awareness was piqued. I had obviously been doing tons of vaccine research up to that point. I graduated in 2008 from that college, and then began to work with people. That's what happens next, is you start to really realize, wow, I memorized a lot of stuff, but what have I really learned? What can I apply, and what's true and what's not true? And then becomes the wheat from the chaff phase of life, where you must clear away the debris that's not true and find what's real, what's true, what's lasting, and that can take some time. So, that's been the last, 9 years of figuring this out. So I feel confident now at this point because I've gone through enough wisdom through practice, right? Wisdom through application. And it's very valuable because that tenders your knowledge. It tenders the book learning. It's in the real world. You're interacting with real parents, real people. You're getting the stories from the ground, the grassroots level. You are hearing their expressions of their emotion, their grief at, having a child that was killed by vaccines. I hear stories like this every day of my life. I've heard vaccine death stories probably for the last, I would say, decade. really, like where I've engaged more with those groups of people. So then you're more likely to hear these stories, right? And the amount of death, debility, autism, disease on all level that comes from a vaccine is becomes so abominable that and so obvious as well, that when I start to look at the modern medical mafia, as I call it, it only looks insane. Because after a time of research, after a time of study, and after a time of witnessing, there is no other logical conclusion, you see. There is no other way to think of it. It is that this must be fraudulent. There must be bad science. There must be a sinister agenda, because any rational, free-thinking, logical individual who is trained in science, especially, I would hope especially so, would come to that conclusion, that this is not health. So that's where I started to go, all right, something else is going on here, because it's still happening. And actually, it's just growing. You know, the amount of vaccines that are on the list of, on the roster to inject into small bodies, the amount of disease rates are just on the rise, not declining. So, it's not seeming to go anywhere. In fact, now they're forcing people, like you're experiencing in California, they're forcing people, they're mandating it, they're bullying people to take their poison, And obviously, if you have to do that, you have a fraudulent product, because if your product is squeaky clean, it's a wonderful product. Like I know I make over 80 different natural products myself by hand. That's what I do in my store. If you go to my website, you'll see all the different things that I make. And I did that because I couldn't find everything that was totally natural, and I wanted to present that to people as part of their healthcare regime, that they can't keep putting toxins on their body, in their body, and expect health. It's just point and click logic. And so, here we have a total split in the understanding. You have people who are just walking around thinking that that's health and protecting the system, and then you have people like myself or yourself who are like, well, wait a second, if you're mandating this stuff, if you're forcing this on me, why? I mean, this isn't the really hot, high-end Ferrari that everybody desires here. This is like hurting people. You're forcing it. If you had a good product, you would never need to force it. People would line up for it. To be honest, I've been vaccinated and I'm vaccine damaged. I had a hell of a life dealing with vaccine damage. Same with my brother. Dr. Andrew Molden, amazing PhD, MD, and was, I would say, murdered by Big Pharma. That's the rumor. And he proved with science that every single vaccine produces a mini stroke in the brain. He has everything's online. You can find it. He proved that this is a fraudulent product. He was a pediatrician, and he was seeing kids having microstrokes before his very eyes because he understood the neurological system. He saw that their eyelid was drooping and their mouth was drooping right after he administered a vaccine. So, like logic, the man had logic, but few MDs seem to, or they're fogging themselves on purpose because they can't handle it. And we're going to get into that because I'm going to talk about how I came to the understanding that this is run as a cult. And that's why it's still in existence, and that's why they're forcing it down our throats, and that's why it's becoming more heavy-handed, and will, because that's how cults operate. And so we have to get to the psychology going on behind this, right? We have to understand what has brought the mindset to this level where they must mandate it and try to force it on us and try to convince us that it's good when it's not. It's like picking up a rotten piece, go out to my compost and pick up some compost and put it in someone's face and tell them it's delicious and they should eat it. And no, it's really good for you. Trust me, it's awesome. Why can't you see that, And that's like a form of gaslighting. The MDs will gaslight their patient. So a patient will get a vaccine, or their child gets a vaccine. Immediately from the vaccine, they notice the child won't wake up, is listless, or has high-pitched screaming. And can you imagine high-pitched screaming for 24 to 48 hours where they don't give up, where they throw up all over themselves, and that's normal? You know what I'm saying? There's insanity happening here. There's psychosis happening here. And this is what I want to highlight, and this is what we need to open the discussion into, that I'm not really seeing discussed very much. I'm seeing, drop phrases, yes, like it's run like a mafia, it's run in this certain type of way, but we haven't really talked much about the deep psychology going on. And what happened to me to really trigger this was I had 2 patients in a row. I had 2 cancer clients. Okay, they've been diagnosed with cancer. One was bladder cancer, and the other was head-to-toe cancer because she already had breast cancer. She already had double mastectomy. She already had chemo and radiation. Of course, that's more fraud medicine that doesn't work. So, of course, she got cancer again, as they say, but it never went away. It was never treated. It was just suppressed. It's always going to come back. So she had a few years there of suffering and numbness and so forth, and then she had bone cancer and liver cancer and brain cancer. And so I'm talking with, and these are 2 separate occurrences, but back to back, and they both, when I'm presenting them with logic, I'm presenting them with what they need to do to heal their body, I'm presenting them with facts, I'm presenting them with science to back up the facts, okay? They would get a glazed look over their eyes, like they couldn't quite comprehend my words, even though I was using, common language. I wasn't I wasn't using the medical lingo. And they looked at me after I spoke and said, well, I don't think my oncologist will let me. And and with both of them saying that, it just hit me, These people are brainwashed. This is brainwashing. This is not a free-thinking human. This is someone who can't think past the information. They are in a mind control loop where they can't think for themselves. Their true identity of who they are has been stolen from them. They're disempowered people. They have to have somebody who's so-called above them tell them what to do, like children. They can't do it themselves. And one of the patients, I don't know what happened with her specifically. I gave her some things to help her, and then she never followed up again. And the other, she was younger, she was a little bit more aware, and she had a lot of other trauma we were working on, and so I really was able to work with her, and we resolved her bladder cancer. We healed her bladder cancer, okay? There's not a lot of people who can just simply say, oh, yeah, we healed this cancer, we healed that cancer. It's not difficult, and this is the other myth. Like, there's myths and there's conjecture that's just parroted, and why do people believe it? Well, so I want to get into it, because here's why it's like the way it is, because people watch television and they read newspapers, and they're owned by the same companies. And then we have to go, well, who owns those? Well, let's trace it back to the people. And then guess what else they own? Well, they own the medical schools. And guess what else they own? They line the pockets of the politicians. And, guess what else they own? They own pretty much anyone in any higher position of power and in any higher and large corporation that would go against the culted mandate. So we have a cult controlling the puppet strings of everybody's minds. That's what we're into. And that's the only way we're going to really stop this madness, absolute madness, are a few things. One, people like us who are not, who have broken free of the cult programming, okay, have healed ourselves, who know who we are and are well enough, we have to keep talking about this. We have to keep sharing the information, and we have to empower as many people as possible to do the exact same thing. Okay, that's the grassroots stuff, which everybody pretty much knows, I would imagine, that's important, right? The other thing, though, that has to happen is we have to prevent people from joining the cult in the first place. Because if you know anything about cults, and I've studied a lot about them, all different kinds, like bona fide cults, like Scientology, like the 12 tribes, like, there's like spaghetti monster cults, basically. I mean, there's some really wacky cults out there. There's ones that are more subtle, and some that are really doomsday cults or cults where they, at the end they think they're going to the spaceship, so they take the Kool-Aid, those types of cults. But they all have similar features. And that's what I want to do, a compare and contrast here today on this show, and help you understand the overlay and why it is a medical cult. But what we need to do is educate people to this effect so that they're aware when they're being pulled into brainwashing, when they're being love-bombed into a situation that looks perfect on the outside but is evil as, evil can be once you, peel off the mask, right, beyond it. And it's this innocence that we have, which is a beautiful innocence. It's, in fact, why I even wanted to be a veterinarian in the first place, is because I felt like nobody's speaking for the innocent ones, Like, what about the animals? What about the babies? They can't say no. Please don't jab me with this poison stick. They can't stop it, right? So we have to be the protectors of them. And so that was my initial feeling and sensation when I wanted to become a vet. And see, my mentor, he was a holistic veterinarian and an ND. And I worked under him for a good year and a half or so. And he inspired me to go to naturopathic college, because once I had my interview at the Guelph, University of Guelph, back then they had this good cop, bad cop routine for the interview. And the bad cop guy, he was very violent and aggressive when I told him that I wanted to be a holistic veterinarian. And there was no way that man was going to let me in that institution, because I didn't fit the cult. You see, I didn't fit the cult belief system, right? I wouldn't fit into that cult. And knowing now, I wouldn't have enjoyed that experience, because I would have had to shut my mouth the whole time. I wouldn't have been able to speak out. I would have been labeled, shunned, marginalized, called a heretic. Those are all cult tactics that keep those who are dissenters or those who question too much quiet. And if they still ask questions, then they're ousted. They're asked to leave, or they're forced to leave. And this is exactly what happens in all types of cults. Okay, but before I get more into the specifics and the compare and contrast on cults, I just want to go back into some history here. Because the other thing I'm noticing people, when they start parroting, vaccines are safe and effective, which is a mind control technique. You keep repeating the same thing over and over again. It's called hypnosis. So vaccines are safe and effective, this kind of thing. That's what you get when you talk to a common, walk up to anyone on the street and ask them what they think about vaccines. They'll probably say, they're safe and effective and they prevent us from disease. And, I know someone who had polio, and good thing we had that vaccine. And I know someone who, they always have a story of someone that they know from their lineage that died from some horrible disease, and if they didn't have vaccines and all this kind of jazz, right? Or if you get into an argument with someone about it, they'll always say the same thing. Like they'll say, just vaccinate your damn kids, that kind of mentality, where they're not really thinking. They're just parroting phrases. They're just on automatic pilot, right? So when you ask someone, where did vaccines come from? Like, do you know the history? Do you know what came about at the turn of the century that made, this 100 years of vaccines that we've, been exposed to so fantastic? Like, where did they come from? Who did it? Well, they can't tell you that information. They don't know that information, right? And this is also a huge part of the problem, the lack of knowledge of the history. We lost our history, and history's also been manipulated and rewritten to serve these megalomaniacs and cult leaders that are behind all of this. But at the same time, it's also the solution when we can share the truth of the history, and more of this history is actually coming to light. And the thing is, it does take some effort. People have to actually do. They actually have to pick up a book. They actually have to be literate enough to read. They actually have to be well enough to think. And this is why we're kind of coming to what I feel like this turning point situation, where we've got to really ramp it up now, because there's going to be so many people. If one in two children now are becoming autistic from vaccines, what's that going to look like in 50 years? Where are these children going to be? Are they going to be able to think for themselves? Are they going to, what I'm saying? We're getting to this point where so many are diseased and debilitated. How are we going to think our way out of this one, right? So that's why the time is really now to act. And I'm hopeful because honestly, I do see it. I do see it more and more in my own, in my own circle of friends and colleagues and even family members. And I continue to pray, and I continue to be hopeful, and I continue to empower and inspire, because those are the tools that we have, our God-given tools that we have to really make the 100th monkey effect that we require for this sea change. We're seeing a lot of fizzling and a lot of ineffective action going on in the vaccine or the anti-vax movement because you have a controlled opposition, which I'll touch on in a little bit too, because that's a cult in and of itself. And, of course, you have controlled opposition in any huge topic or any huge such topic like vaccines where you actually have to force people to do it, whether you have a very divided population, people who you wouldn't touch it with a 10-foot pole, and people who are, threatening others that if they don't vaccinate their kids, they're going to force them or whatever. When you have any type of contention to that level, you are going to have controlled opposition because the powers that be, the cult leaders, they understand that eventually this truth is going to leak. And the best thing to do for them is to control the leaking, to control the direction of the way it leaks, to control and maneuver the truth to their own benefit for as long as they possibly can. So if you don't think there's controlled opposition in the vaccine movement, you're asleep. So, but that is run as well like a cult. And when I explain to you how a cult is run, then you'll see that, because anytime you challenge a belief in a cult member and you continue to poke and prod that belief, you'll get a cognitive dissonance response, which can be very violent, aggressive, emotional, charged, and it comes at you pretty strong, and it's not a debate. It is an attack, really. It's an abusive attack. So it's not like, hey, I was thinking, do you want to talk maybe about vaccines a little bit? And I saw this study, and or have you heard about the Flexner report? How everything sort of began from the Rockefeller Foundation, buying out all the medical schools and stuff, giving them a lot of money and getting on their boards and manipulating policy and so forth. But what are you talking about? Right? That's not an actual discussion, right? That's not two people. Let's hash this out. And that's what you get in cults. You don't get logical, clear thinking or proper debate. It's just charged. It's just attack. It's just get away from me because I feel cognitive dissonance, which is when two belief systems clash in your mind and you can't make heads or tails of the new information. You can't fit it in to your paradigm, to where you're at. And so it's safer in that person's mind to go with what they've always known. The new information will always seem outrageous, and they'll push it away in any possible way, in any silly way they can. It could be very absurd. And there are psychological studies done that prove this, that show this, that when people are mind-controlled or they're under hypnosis, the hypnotic thought, even if it's absurd, they will make up something that's probably just as absurd, but they'll never go, that's really weird. I don't even know why I said that. They'll not do that. They'll actually make up something that to them in their mind, in their warped sense of mind, makes sense. So there was the example of the woman who she was under hypnotic suggestion so there was a vase placed on the table, and there's flowers in the vase, and she was told under hypnotic suggestion to put her shoe on the table when given the cue, which is kind of a weird thing to do, right? So she puts the shoe on the table once the cue is given. She doesn't know, of course, why she's done it because she's been told to forget this. And so when asked why she put the shoe on the table, she took the flowers out of the vase and put them in the shoe. And she said, I did it because I have a vase at home that looks similar to my shoe, and I wanted to see what the flowers look like inside of it. So this is an example of understanding the psychology of humans, that we would rather make up something illogical to make sure we're always right. The ego wants to always be right. It's really hard to say, oh, you know what, shucks, I was wrong. You're right, I'm wrong. Gosh, it's a hard thing to do, especially when you're under suggestion to never do that. So that's an important piece of psychology that, we need to really understand about people. Another point I just want to make while I'm on this topic is there was actually a very well circulated YouTube video about an experiment done in I think it was a dentist's office, so in a waiting room. So a bunch of people in a waiting room, and the unsuspecting person comes into the waiting room. All the rest of the members that are in the waiting room are all part of this scheme, okay? And they're all sitting there reading magazines, whatever. So the unsuspecting person comes in, sits down, and all of a sudden, a few minutes later, there's a bell or a beep that comes over the speakers. And everybody stands up. And then they stand up for about 30 seconds, and then everybody sits down again. And the unsuspecting person looks at that and goes, wow, that's really weird. Why are they doing that? Trying to figure it out, right? That's really weird. I don't understand. Am I supposed to know anything? Doesn't ask, doesn't say anything. And then this repeats. By the second or third time, I can't remember, I think it was alarmingly quick, maybe even the second time, in this one case, it was a she starts doing it. The bell rings. Stands up, doesn't know why she's standing up, has no clue why, but everybody else is doing it, you see. So there's a psychology of going with the herd, of being one with your social surroundings. We're social creatures. And the people who have perpetuated this fraud upon us, they studied this and they know this. Look at just advertising. Look at people who do advertising. They know all this stuff. They know how subliminal messages work. They know how to manipulate the human mind. Don't think they don't use these tactics. This is the danger. We have snakes in the grass here. We have evil afoot. We have a sinister agenda behind it. And if you don't see that, and you don't understand the history, and you don't know where it's come from, we're not going to be able to dismantle it. There's just no possible way, right? So let's go to the history here for a moment. So the turn of the last century, we have the American Medical Association that was formed. And an interesting note there, one of the main reasons why it was formed was purposefully to attack, discredit, and destroy the American Homeopathic Association. And homeopathy was very pronounced. It was very strong back then. We had free medicine. Basically, you could go to anyone freely, and if you wanted to go to the medical quacks, the chemists, and get your mercury and get your poison, your lead, and whatever they were using, and do your bloodletting, you could go to them, or you could go to a homeopathic practitioner, very well trained, gentle medicine, doesn't suppress symptoms, doesn't force the body. You could even go to a hospital that was homeopathically run. You could go to any type of folk medicine person that would, people would know in their. I think I'm reincarnated one of these people. Sometimes I think I'm just one of those folk medicine women who just knew every plant, just knew God's medicine. It just grows all around us, and this is how we heal, and nutrition and these kinds of things. It's just the most natural thing, right? And I feel like that's who I was, in a previous life or many lives. But, this is what they would do. They would go and they would do their basic things. They would even have things they would do at home that they knew. Like everyone had their own awareness of health and how to deal with basic things. They weren't totally clueless. It was the movement into the cities that started to get us into disease rates and so forth, with sanitation issues and lack of plumbing and just lack of basic knowledge. Once you get into a high concentration of people who are peeing and pooing all over the place and all over each other, which of course you're going to have all kinds of weird stuff going on. And then you have these chemical medicines coming in en masse, and these ridiculous pesticides and herbicides are spraying all over the place, and people are getting poisoned, and that's why they were sick. But back to what I was saying, so we have the AHA, which fell apart under the horrid attack tactics by the AMA. They were, evil tends to triumph, if you know what I mean. Evil can will go as low as they want to go, and good people don't do that, and so good people get taken advantage of. And so we had the Carnegie and Morgan and Rockefeller families, extremely rich, that shouldn't have been allowed to be that rich, because when you have unlimited wealth available to you, you can do whatever you want. And you can hire whomever you want, you can manipulate whomever you want, you can buy off whomever you want. So this is where really the sinister action began. If you want to learn, I will talk a little bit more about it, but if you want to know, the source of this is G. Edward Griffin, the amazing historian, medical historian, researcher. He exposes, how the Federal Reserve was created by sinister means. So he talks a lot about banking, but he talks a lot about cancer as well. And he has a book called World Without Cancer. He talks about vitamin B17 and Laetrile and how that is a very well-known cure for cancer. We have hundreds of cures for cancer, of course, which are suppressed by these same big interests. Okay, so these people, they started to, through the Flexner report, okay, so this is like turn of the 20th century, right? Mainly this was backed originally by Carnegie. And so that Flexner report, which was basically a study, a book-length study of medical education in the United States and Canada. It was written by a professional educator. His name was Abraham Flexner, and it was published in 1910. And the Carnegie Foundation paid for it and supported it all the way through. So we had a free medical market going on in the 1800s, early 1900s, right? Nobody had the upper hand. But then in the early 1920s, this Carnegie Institute hired Flexner to do all this inventory of all the medical schools and hospitals and all the ones that prescribe drugs, all the ones that practice allopathic medicine. And then the Carnegies, okay, they gave money to the hospitals and schools that were doing this. So they basically were beefing up the ones that were practicing the allopathic medicine, okay? And then what they did is they bought off politicians and judges and so forth, and they passed legislature, which it made it actually illegal to practice medicine unless they prescribe drugs. So basically what they did is say, if you don't prescribe drugs, you're a quack, which they coined that term, and they made it illegal. So you go to jail. If you started to, so all the people doing homeopathics, all the people who were, your folk medicine people, they could go to jail now. So this bullying began, and this has been going on, since this time. And then we've been socialized. So then the same interest started to bought up all the newspapers. At that time, it was just newspapers. Obviously, it wasn't television for a little while. But then when that came out, they made sure they were controlling that as well. So when you're controlling the discussion, right, you're controlling the flow of information. You have all the money that you would ever need to push an agenda. It's really not that far-fetched an idea. First of all, it's truth. This is all researchable, backed information. Secondly, though, if you just think about it, that Rockefeller, Carnegie, that whole Morgan, all these people, they were very devious people. They were psychopaths, They were narcissists. These were people who obviously are, soulless on some level to do this because they really did not care about people. They were not interested in that. They were interested in power control on the utmost level. And they did it. And they were clever enough to do it, and they were devious enough to do it. So this is what's still going on to this day. And if you don't know that, then you don't know much, because these are the people who are funding the pharmaceutical companies. This is all where the money came through. This is all the same interests, all the same lineages, all the same people. And they are the ones feeding the machine, feeding the monster. Now, you can look this up easily online. I'm not going to go too much more into it. But look, when you have the same interests on the boards, handing over the money, giving the shiny toys, All the grants are coming from them. The pharmaceuticals are all bought. The pharmaceutical industry then bought all the schools out. Okay. Then you got to ask the next question, and your logical conclusions is, okay, so if they own everything, they bought everything, well, who's teaching the doctors? Who are the teachers in the schools teaching the doctors? Whose pockets are they in? What belief systems are they adhering to, right? And this is where we get into the problem, because now you have doctors being taught by pharmaceutical interests that want to ensure their bottom line continues to grow and grow exponentially. And behind them, you have megalomaniacs who would really love to be kings of everybody, who would really love to own it all, who would really love to see nothing more than a reduced population and something they can control on the highest possible order. This is the sickness. This is the true disease right there. You have to admit that that's there. It has to be part of the story. So I'm bringing this in. Now I want to understand, okay, this is here. Now what's going on with a doctor that can't see it, who's supposed to be the most intelligent being apparently on the earth by the way that they fluff their egos in med school, but they can't seem to understand that they're being cult-controlled and lied to, and that when they have a baby high-pitched screaming for 48 hours, that it couldn't possibly be the safe and effective vaccine that they injected into the little body right out of the gate, right from birth. Okay? Because that's where my mind came to, like, no, something is wrong here. These are not free-thinking people, because any free-thinking person would immediately be able to understand cause and effect, right? And I mentioned in my YouTube video yesterday, I said, look, if somebody cuts you or pricks your skin, and then you notice in a second that you're starting to bleed, and you go, oh my gosh, I'm bleeding. And then that person goes, oh my God, you're bleeding. Where did that come from? And you're like, oh, well, you just cut me with, you cut me, so I'm bleeding. And it's like they really can't make the connection that they injected. And then immediately they have this effect. Like scientism is, I would say the definition of scientism is the lack of proper observation of cause and effect. Okay. As well as the biased hypotheses where the end result is the known factor before the beginning part of the science. So the end result is what's already on the roster, it's already in their mind, that they are after that as the goal. The conclusions have been written before the hypothesis. That's scientism. Okay? Missing out cause and effect and not putting in the details of the rest of the story. So conveniently extruding or removing key elements that would change the whole design of the picture. So, for example, we know like the CDC has a very famous oopsie on their record of destroying their own science that proved that African-American boys who were vaccinated, I believe it was the MMR vaccine, were getting autism, like through the roof, right? And they're like, well, you know what? That doesn't really prove our conclusion the way we need it to be. So let's omit that data so that we can get to the conclusion of what our story needs to actually look like. That's scientism. And that's what we're seeing. If you go to the CDC, the FDA, you go to any of these government websites, what you're getting is scientism. And if you look harder and you actually find real science that's done, you will find proof positive that vaccines are damaging people. But nobody goes and they really look, right? Nobody really goes and digs enough. The doctors aren't reading their studies. The doctors aren't asking these questions. These authority figures are just dictate, and you nod and smile and parrot what you're told to say. And then, if you don't, you're in trouble, aren't you? Okay, so that little bit of history is really super important. If you want to look at that more and you want to understand that more and who these people are, I invite you to do that. It's a huge piece of it. So that history. Now we have to go for another piece of history that is absolutely crucial that I'm not hearing discussed. I'm not hearing even the anti-vaxxers talk much about. And I'm also seeing, in the controlled opposition is pushing for green vaccines. They're pushing for safe vaccines, which is an oxymoron. You can't ever have a safe vaccine, no such thing. But the problem is they're missing key information. So anybody who you suspect is being fraudulent, they're always going to have gaps in their information, okay? And this is a huge gap in information. I mean, this is a huge part of history that was going on for many years that nobody really wants to discuss. And it is the history of how vaccines were created and who were the people involved, okay? So what's the first thing that comes to mind? We go, well, where did vaccines come from? Oh, yeah, that man who pasteurized milk, right? That guy, Louis Pasteur. That's where the name comes from, pasteurization, from this person who was, born in the 1800s and died in late 1800s. And he created what's called the germ theory. And the germ theory postulates that disease comes from germs. So a germ, like a bacteria, a virus, a fungus, whatever, will infect healthy tissue and grow and live and multiply and create specific diseases that have specific titles that look a certain way, okay? And what came born from that, so what came out of that basically is the next understanding of how does this actually work in, like, what are the rest of the postulates? Like, how do we make sure we know it's disease? Like, you can't just say that it does that. We have to show in some way that it's doing it, right? So then what happened was Dr. Robert Koch, he created Koch's postulates, okay? And a postulate actually means it's an accepted statement of fact. So it's actually not considered a theory, it's considered a fact. And there's not too much said that bravely and boldly in science that it's fact so much, right? Like everyone's always theory. I mean, it's vaccine theory, it's germ theory, right? It's not even really a proven anything, it's just an idea. Okay, the postulates are this. The germ that causes that specific disease, it has to be actually found in every case of that same disease under the conditions which explain the disease. So it kind of has to be pretty similar, right? It has to be actually exactly similar, or that's not what the germ does. The germ doesn't cause a disease in that case, right? The other postulate is the germ can't be found in either another disease, which has a different expression, like a different symptom picture, and it cannot be found in healthy people. I mean, if you had a germ in healthy people, they'd be diseased. Like, you just can't, that's just not the definition, okay? And then the third postulate is the germ can be isolated and it can be used to induce an experimental disease, like you could take that out and you could put it in animals and you could then make another disease in another life form, like another animal, that looks like the one in humans. So those were Koch's postulates. Okay, so I mean, most people won't even know Koch's postulates, okay? But, this is the stuff that I learned in school, okay, myself. I was told this is the germ theory, this is how disease works, this is how infection works, this is how this is how it all happens, okay? Don't even question it. This is it, and this is what you learn in med school, okay? Problem is, he was a plagiarist, and he was an imposter. And this has come to light more recently that this is the truth, because his grandson actually released his lab notes, and a book was written about it. And this happened in 1975, where the grandson did that, and it took a while in the 90s for it. I think it was it was earlier than that. I think it was 1920s or something was starting to come out that he was a fraud. But so his grandson died in 75. That's what it is. And then they released the lab notes. And Pasteur, he instructed his family to never release the lab notes. I wonder why he did that now. What was he hiding, right? So a man named Gerald Geisen, he's a science historian. He was one of the first people to thoroughly review all his lab notes. And hilariously, so here we go, 1995 comes around. And this is so ironic. It's proclaimed the year of Pasteur. It's actually named in his honor this year. And Geisen writes an article exposing his lab notes this same year. Oh my gosh, too funny. And basically saying, Pasteur lied about his research on vaccines and germs, right? And that his ideas were actually plagiarized. He plagiarized them from his contemporaries. And he was a fraud. And even on his deathbed, Pasteur, he totally recanted, and he said that his contemporary Claude Bernard was right, and that the terrain is everything and the germ is nothing. But the germ theory of disease took off. It's profitable. You can make all these different named diseases like out the yin-yang. You can blame the germ. You can punish the germ for the disease. You can make a lot of money on this fraud. And this is what we need to understand, is that there is a terrain theory and a germ theory, and back in those times, it was contested humongously in science. They were trying to prove what causes illness, and Louis Pasteur was the fraud that won out. But we had Antoine Béchamp, all his discoveries of pleomorphism versus monomorphism, which I urge you to go, key in pleomorphism. And somatic theory, and understand that there's more to the body that's not even identified and accepted in modern medicine. And that we have Royal Raymond Rife as well. His discoveries prove and back up pleomorphism or the terrain theory. We have Gaston Naessens, all right, another contemporary. We have a German man, Gunther Einderlein, and he's like late 1800s, and he died in 1960s or so. His discoveries, there are many, and this is the real science, and this is the good science, but this is the suppressed science, because that doesn't serve the big business industries, and they will squash, they will put down, they will attack, just like they did with the AHA as the AMA, took out the homeopaths. They will spin lies and put it in their media and put it on the TV and do whatever it takes to destroy any competition against their crap. But this is the awakening that we need and the discussion. So anybody talking about vaccines on any level as actually being effective on any level knows nothing about the human body. And this is where the discussion needs to go, the real discussion. Because germs do not cause disease. And if germs do not cause disease, what the hell are we injecting into people and why? Do you see? This is key. This is important, all right? So look this up, educate yourself on it. I'm going to give a little more here, okay? So listen, Pasteur, he started to think that, all right, if microbes are bad, then we got to kill all the microbes in our food, right, because they're bad. So let's pasteurize all the milk and so forth, even though it doesn't kill all of them, right? It just damages the food and it destroys its natural enzymes and its nutrients. So it's also ridiculous. Pasteurization in and of itself is actually quite ridiculous. But that's not much that a lot of people want to admit to. They like their milk, they like their dead foods, and that contributes to disease. Okay, so the history of Pasteur, he wasn't credible. He wasn't a nice man. He was very perverted man. So if you want to learn more about his character, there's a book that was written in 1923, and it's called Pasteur Exposed by Miss Ethel Douglas Hume. So you can learn all about his ridiculousness on that book. There's a few great books as well. There's one called Pasteur, Plagiarist, Imposter, and that was published in 1940 or in the 1940s. And I think the updated title is The Dream, the Lie of Louis Pasteur, R.B. Pearson. You can look that up too. Okay, so here we go. We have this false idea. So here's what happened with the real truth. We have Antoine Béchamp. So that's the contemporary of Pasteur, who was, ripped off of his theories in some level by Pasteur. So he discovered the true nature of these germs, of these bacteria, viruses, whatever you want to call them. I mean, we have never isolated a virus, by the way. So I don't know, like, virus, what are we really talking about here? Because no one's ever really isolated a virus. So I think we're into another whole level of hoaxes just with viruses, to be honest. But I'm still studying that, so I won't say too much on that one. Okay, so we have his deathbed recantation, and now Béchamp said, look, here's what's going on, okay? We have a milieu. What we are seeing is when we isolate these organisms, they are pleomorphic, which means that they are capable of changing their form. They can change from one type of organism to another depending on their environment. So remember I was talking about Koch's postulates? Well, those go right out the window now, don't they? Because if a disease morphs itself depending on its environment, it is not going to be found in every case. It's not going to present the same in every case, okay? It's going to change depending on the person or the body or the type that it's inside of. So that's very important. So Koch's postulates are also false science. The other thing that is false about the postulates is they will find in healthy people these germs, so-called, these diseases or these bacteria or fungi or so-called viruses. They're carried or in healthy people. So that just doesn't fly either. The whole theory falls apart actually pretty easily, like a dried out crumble cake. Bye-bye. So now we have a beautiful and elegant and time-tested discovery of the pleomorphism or of the terrain theory, which I have seen again and again in my practice and seen work. And when you apply the basic principles of health to people, they heal. Voila! No vaccine required. Prevention, that would be nutrition, that would be proper water, that would be exercise, not eating poisons, not putting poisons in you. That's how you stay healthy. That's, you don't pee where you eat. You don't urinate all over your house. You keep your things sanitary enough where you don't invite things to cause toxicity, because that's really what causes the illness in the body. It isn't the organism itself. It's the toxicity. And once the person is diseased, that's when they get germs, because the germs come in like flies to garbage to eat the waste materials, that the inflamed tissue that's hypertrophied, that's necrotic. That's what feeds. And the other thing that also throws not only germ theory but vaccine theory out the window is that we have endemic life forms within our bodies. We have a whole microbiome in our bodies, even different fungal forms in our bodies. That's what Candida is. That's endemic to us. It's inside of us. You get sick from the inside out. When someone gets Candida, which often is caused by vaccines or antibiotics, you see that a lot with antibiotics as well. So the vaccines come in because the heavy metals will cause a lot of inflammation and a lot of problems, and then the Candida is actually changing its form to an aggressive type. Its lineage changes to actually go to the heavy metal and sequester it and surround it and keep it away from doing harm to you. It's actually trying to help you. Now, its side effects are nasty. So, obviously you have to detox the heavy metals to clear the Candida. And I say that again and again. People who are stuck with Candida, they have to clear the heavy metals, because that's why one of the main reasons why it's come. Another main reason why it's come is because it's being unchecked by the rest of the bacteria, because they've been poisoned by antibiotics and all the rest of their microbiome is damaged. And so Candida is having some fun. It's allowed to flourish. Nobody's checking it and policing it anymore. So, so say, here's some logic for you. I know it's hard, but here's some actual logic, okay, is if you have endemic disease that you're carrying within you already, how on earth is an injection of particles of another disease going to prevent you from getting out of balance and sick from a disease? Do you see? It makes no sense at all. It doesn't prevent a thing. It's your terrain that keeps you healthy. And it's so ironic, and it's so upside down. It's so absolutely backward that we think that injecting heavy metals and formaldehyde and foreign DNA and RNA and strange molds, because every vaccine is contaminated by mycotoxins, which was, it was a whistleblower that blew the lid off of that one, a little while ago, Dr. Mikovits, right? She's like, guys, I'm a scientist in the lab. I check vaccines. All your vaccines are mycotoxin, mycoplasma, contaminated. What's going on here? And she was fired and sued and all that, right? Not like, oh, whoops, we made a mistake. We better remake all our cell line lineages that we're growing all this stuff on, and we better fix this problem because we're really going to hurt people this way. No. They don't care about you. They don't care about health. This is important to understand. They want nothing to do with your health. They want to make customers for life. They want your money, your time, your energy, and when you're done, your property. That's what they want. So we really have to see the light here. So injecting that into the body when we know that it's the terrain that governs our health, now are we seeing the absurdity yet? Are we starting to get it wrapped around our little minds that this is just not health, and this is not prevention, and it's not even how disease works? From the fundamental science, from the truth of history, this is the conversation, okay? So how are we doing for time? So we're an hour in. That's good, because I think I need about an hour to talk about the understanding of the cult on a deeper level. I just want to talk a little bit more about the germ theory, just a tiny bit more, so you understand pleomorphism, so that you feel a bit more confident about this, because it's a real sea change. It's a real paradigm shift in one's mind to not be afraid of germs. You see, they rule by fear. The propaganda is fear, right? So when you go to your cult member doctor and you bring your little innocent baby to them, which is probably the worst decision you've ever made in your life, but anyway, you take your little baby to them and they say, oh, well, we have to get your baby up to date on all of these, and they show you the list of all the important diseases that they're going to prevent in not only your baby, but miraculously through other people by vaccinating them, which is a whole other strange logic, which I'll touch on. And they're going to then administer a bunch of toxins, right, which is now going to set up that child for a bunch of illnesses, ear infections, throat infections, on and on and on. But the main thing that they do is they scare you, right? It's not like, well, here's some choice. Here's some medical choice. I'm going to give you some consenting ideas. You can consent or not consent, because it's your body, it's your life, it's your health. So I just want to present this information to you, like, this is a vaccine and this is what it's purported to prevent, and here's the vaccine insert, so you know all the risks and all the potential risks, including death, including autism, that can happen from these shots. And so, but you can make that decision yourself. You can let me know. We can do it here today, or you can come back another time. Do they talk like that? Of course they don't. They are arrogant and rude and bullying and gaslighting and narcissistic, and they tell you, here's how it's going to go, and it's my way or the highway. And that's most of them. That's probably 80%, okay, maybe it's 90% of the practitioners that you'll see. And because I hear the stories, okay, I'm not making this up. And I mean, I'm in Canada, and I hear stories from the States and here, and it's all the same. They just get very upset if you ever dare question their authority and their knowledge and what they know to be true, right? True to form for a brainwashed person. So they're bullied into it. I see so many parents, they're like, I wish I listened to my gut. I wish I didn't do it. I knew it was wrong. I knew not to do it. I wish I did more research. It's the regret moms and dads. You hear the regret stories again and again and again. And, a person like myself or you, Sally, or anyone listening who's gone through enough education and enough research to know the truth, and they hear these stories as well from other loved ones or friends or people online or whatever, it gets to you after a while. You're like, I can't hear this anymore. This is painful. This is yet another family ruined, another life ruined. This is not just like, oh, ouch, I got a throat infection from my vaccine and I'm kind of getting over it and I'm healing stuff. No. This destroys people for their entire lives. This changes people's trajectory in their lives for the rest of their lives, and it affects the rest of their family. This is not a small decision. This is life-changing decision. And then you have a bully of a practitioner, bowling you over and browbeating you in pushing you into making this decision that can change your life forever? Really? I mean, it is stunning to witness. It is mind-boggling to behold that this is reality, that this is actually going on, and that it's allowed to go on by so-called intelligent people. It's shameful. I think people need to just accept their mistakes and sit in healthy shame for a while. Sit in your healthy shame for a while, Feel bad that you screwed over so many people. Ask for forgiveness, pray for forgiveness, and repent, and then stop it. And that's what these doctors need to do. Will they do it? There are some that do it. We know there are, Dr. Suzanne Humphreys. Wow. I mean, we have our heroes, in this movement. They're MDs. They know, and they've had to undo their cult brainwashing. Now, there are some they're kind of half-assed. They're kind of like partially there. They're trying, but they're not quite there yet. They're not all the way because there is no acceptable amount of it. There is no need for any of them. There's no need for any drug or any injection. There should be a proper emergency medical center for absolute emergencies. That's what this medicine was supposed to be designed for. But it's abuse. They're abusing their power. They're greedy, and they're thoughtless to the results. Like you have people who are injecting. So these doctors are injecting. Do you think they follow up like years down the road and like actually find out what happens to all these people? Do you think they really know what they've done? Like, there's nobody following up. There's no studies following up either. Studies going, there's a few, but I mean, like flu shot. Look at the flu shot. What the hell are they doing? They're if you actually look at their science, they're basically showing a 3% effective rate. 3%. What if your car said, oh, it's going to work 3% of the time you want to buy it? I mean, no one in their right mind in a good market system would ever support such a piece of crap. 3%. They must even have to make up the 3% because it doesn't do that either. It gives the flu to people. They always get sick. Everybody who's ever said they get the flu shot, they're always sick. And of course they are, because it gives them a terrain damage. It causes inflammation. It causes dead tissue. It causes all kinds of confusion in the communication system of the brilliant body. Everything in the nervous system goes haywire. Yeah, of course, they've been poisoned. Of course they're going to be sick from it. That's just logic in my mind. But, this is a failure. And, so, okay, let's just say the flu vaccine actually is effective to that 3%. Let's give them the 3%. Let's say it's awesome for 3%, okay? Shouldn't we see, so you know how they make the flu vaccine? They kind of they capture the air and mucus and they put it on an egg embryo or a circumcised boy baby penis, or they take actual fetal tissue off of dead babies and they use these cell lineages. They use all kinds of bizarre cells to grow them as a medium to grow their virus, which is absolutely despicable and a whole other disgusting topic of lack of ethics and morals. Okay, so they do these crazy ass, insane, mad scientist crap. And then they take this pretend, they can't see the virus, so they're hoping it's there. And they put a couple of them together, and then they try to take all the cells away by washing it a few times. Then they put it in your vaccine. They put it into your body. Does that sound like health to you? If it does, you need to shake your head pretty hard. Okay, so they do that, but at the end, so hindsight's 20/20. After the flu season, they assess everything. They go, oh, so guess what, guys? We screwed up. Like, we didn't get the right type of virus this time. The wild type was different than the one that we captured. Sorry, oops. They did that 3 years in a row. They had mistrialed, a flu vaccine. I think it was 2005 to 2008. 5, 6, and 7. I think it was 5, 6, and 7. They screwed up 3 in a row, and then they got it the next year, whatever. So let's just talk about science for a second. Real science, not scientism. Real science. Let's look at the statistics now of how many people got the flu in those years where they misfired, and how many people then got the flu where they were on target. Wouldn't you think, simple logic, wouldn't you think that the time that they were on target, they'd see less flu cases? They'd see less of the flu, right, than the years that they screwed up. Wouldn't they have more flu if their 3% vaccine worked? Wouldn't they see, during those 3 years where they failed that vaccine, wouldn't they see a huge, or maybe even an epidemic of flu? But they definitely see a surge of flu, wouldn't they? But guess what? The science doesn't show that at all. We have failure in all levels, science and proof in the pudding of people, telling you they're anecdotal. You can call it anecdotal all you want, but that is somebody's evidence. That is somebody's experience. I take that very weighted. And they are not really it's not really doing anything, guys. So maybe you should pull that product. It's kind of, but no, they're not going to do that. In fact, ever since the year 2000, and before that, the law changed to allow vaccine manufacturers free and easy, not to get away from lawsuits where they're not going to get sued. And that happened because you had Homeland Security stepping in and saying, oh, this year we could have an epidemic of flu, so we're going to step in and we're going to protect the manufacturers in case of their bad vaccine, because we're making them do it because in case of an epidemic. So it was a very sly maneuver to take away the risk, and then every year from there on in, it was this creeping, let's just give now the flu vaccine to not just elderly people, let's give it to the young. Okay, now let's give it to the next age group. Now let's give it to pregnant mothers. Now let's just give it to everybody every year. Everybody every year get the flu shot, the end. Oh, that's convenient. How much money are you making on that? On a 3% so-called effective vaccine that's hitting and missing? I mean, this is all of the vaccines. This is just one example, and I don't have time to go through all of them. But in my series, I'm going to continue my vaccine video series. I've only done part 1, which was yesterday. I'm going to do more, and I'm going to go through this, and I'm going to expose this, and I'm going to, I'm not the only one, okay? I'm not the only one doing this great work. There are many doing this great work. There are many heroes in this movement, including you, Sally. And it's we have to just keep trying. We just have to keep talking. We just have to keep putting the logic together for people, and it's people like myself who have a science background, who are medically trained, who have lots of experience that can really hit it home, can hit it home for people. Do you get it? Do you see it? Can we break through the mind control on this one? Because that's where I'm going with it. I'm writing a book called Cracking the Cult Code as well to try to help expose cults in modern society, how they masquerade, and book 1 will be about the medical cults, absolutely. It's important that we see it, and once you see it, this is what's great. It's kind of like the ego. Once you see the tricks of the ego, you can't unsee them, and it's like that with cults. Once you kind of see the tricks, you see it. It's once you see what a narcissist does, and you study that, you can smell that a mile away, miles and miles away, okay? So now I just want to, I think I've explained some of that history, at least well enough, at least enough leads where you can go, I hope I've designed it for you in your mind in a logical way where you can say, look, we've been bamboozled in a very monumental way for a long time. And, the generations die out. I mean, I don't know, like, if you remember your grandparents and you remember how many vaccines they had, well, basically none or one or hardly any. And they're living into their hundreds. If they're not medicated, if they didn't get them, drugged down too much, they live. They live 100, they live long. But now, no. Now they're dying earlier. They were brainwashed. A lot of, like, even my grandparents, they were very much the victims of this medical model because they sold it. If you watch the old commercials, they sold how awesome this medicine was. That it was like, pop a pill and you're suddenly, the healthiest, you're going to live forever. Like, they just lied and, manipulated people into believing that this was like the best thing that was ever made. And now look how modern medicine is just advancing and all technology is so awesome and everything's so awesome. Like, they just sold it to them and they really bought it hook, line, and sinker. And it's been taking generations to undo this false belief. And we're getting there. But you got to know, you got to understand, there's not even an immune system. This is the other thing. There's no immune system. Where's the immune system? Show me it. And show me it in anatomy. Show me the immune system. I'll show you the circulatory system. I will show you the nervous system. I will show you the lymphatic system. I guess that's the closest we've got. But the immune system is no such thing. It's like a made-up system. They don't even understand the body. They think the heart's a pump. Did you know the heart doesn't even pump blood? The heart is not a pump. The heart is a vortex, and it creates heat. It's what creates our heat, and it actually produces a vortex. And your veins, your arteries, actually have a pressure suction, and it pulls itself, right? Okay, so that's not known. They thought that the vestigial organs were like tonsils, appendix, the wisdom teeth. We're born wrong. We're born imperfect. God screwed up. We aren't born with anything that, breast milk's bad. Just, this is what's happened. It's like an affront to God is really the root of it. The evil part of it is that's the root of it. It's a denial of this perfection that we are. And we are born with everything that we need. Absolutely. There is nothing needing to come off the body or be put on the body. Okay? And after you see it, like I have my own child that I've, obviously hasn't seen the inside of a hospital or witnessed any white coat, has amazing health and never had any throat infections, ear infections, grommets in the ears. I mean, this barbarian medicine. We are literally in the dark ages of medicine, and we've been sold that we're in the best new technology ever. It's such an upside-down, backwards thing. I can't express it more. But I really want you to understand that we don't even understand the body. We don't even understand the immune system. When I studied immunology in school, I'm like, this is it. Like, this book is it. Like, they're making war analogies. They're showing, like, cute cartoon pictures of so-called T cells and B cells and stuff. Like, what the heck is this? This is what we know about the immune system? This was the least developed understanding of any of my ologies that I had to study. Any of the levels of science, that was the baby. That was the one. And you know what I realize now? I don't think it was allowed to grow. I don't think it was allowed to get past that, because if it got past that, germ theory is done, the vaccines are done, suppressive drugs are done. They won't let it grow past it. They won't let it expand, because then we would know that it's all fraud, and it would fall apart. So eventually a revolution will come, because a revolution always comes, because you can never suppress the truth forever, ever. You can't. It's impossible. It's a scientific revolution happens when a scientist keeps manipulating science to their own aims and discarding truth and putting it in a pile behind them, and that pile keeps growing and growing and growing and growing until it topples over them and crushes them. That's a scientific revolution, and we are close. Like, I will keep adding to that pile as best as I can. And if we all do it, eventually it will all, you can't have to dig yourself out, right? So you're going to have to face the avalanche. And that's really, we're close. We're very close. But I was alarmed in school that this was what they were teaching us for immunology. What a joke. I've had to do tons of my own study just to grasp what, what's happening. Things like, they'll take the tonsils out. My tonsils were removed. I'll just say this and then I'll go into the cult structure. One thing that happens, so 2 of the worst, most dangerous vaccines, they're all dangerous. They're all horrible. They're all the worst. But the worst of the worst is the MMR and the DTaP, because you're getting 3 different crazy crap all at once. The body, you'll never get 3 such called diseases, infections like that at once. It overwhelms the system. It makes too many white blood cells to try to get rid of the poison. It sends haywire signals through the body. It creates for sure you're going to get the circle of Willis, which is the nervous system in the brain, not being fed because the blood gets really sludgy, and then the oxygen can't get to the nerve ending, so that's where you get the stroke, the mini strokes. That's, again, Dr. Andrew Molden's work. So, you're basically, and autism can happen at that moment, of course, because it's repeated injury to the circle of Willis in the brain, the nervous system in the brain, right? So there you get your autistic situation. Okay, so those are the worst of the worst. And one thing, I have a note on Facebook. I compiled a lot of my research. And it's called Vaccine Studies and Comprehensive Materials, and I have it as a public note, so you can go to my Facebook page, and which is called Great Central Sun is the name of my Facebook page, and you can read it. And I've got every study you'd ever want to read to prove that vaccines are fraud, including the germ theory stuff. Okay, but one thing, because I experienced this personally, so it was very near and dear to me, but the tonsils, so I got MMR, and then soon after I began to have issues in my throat, and they told me I had strep throat. I had strep throat, and then they gave me antibiotics, and then the antibiotics suppressed the agent of strep, killing the weak one, but the strong always survive, because that's what antibiotics do. They create resistance. That's by nature what they do. And we have many, many resistant antibiotics now, which we will eventually see the end of, so we better figure out the natural way to do it, which is basically vitamin C, vitamin D, the common sense things that we have already available. So this process happened to me 12 times. It's like that in and of itself shows you the failure of this medicine, that I have this reoccurrence 12 times. And then they removed my tonsils. I had a tonsillectomy. And it affected my heart as well, because the strep agent is still with me. I still struggle with it to this day. It's vaccine injury. I have a secondary infection of strep. Why? So I found some research where they, and it's in this note, where they took vaccinated children who had tonsillectomies, basically. They took this tissue and they looked at it. And what they found was that the tonsil tissue and the adenoid tissue was infected with measles. They were finding the injected, so-called virus that they injected into the body. They were finding the same thing in the tonsil tissue and in the adenoids. So they were creating diseased tissue by virtue of this. Once the injected inflammation cycles happen and the immune system, part of the so-called immune system would be the tonsils, right? The tonsils is an amazing organ that it communicates what you're eating to the brain to have a whole cascade of things ready, and it's like an alarm system. It's like one of the first alarm systems. Like, this is coming in. Oh, looks like we have this coming in, guys. Like, let's pay attention to this. Oh, it's like a sampler. It's like taste testing everything and sending it to the brain. That's the tonsils. And the tonsil tissue became inflamed, probably by the heavy metal poisoning or the poisoning done to it by the injection itself and the full body lack of communication. So things got broken down. The cells can't re-nourish. The cells begin to get diseased. They've been then given an agent inside the body, and it'll go to where the diseased tissue is. And so they basically made diseased tissue and its infection. That's what happened. So once that happens, then a secondary infection can happen. So like a secondary bacteria will come in to go, oh gosh, like we have some really bad tissue here. We better start to, we better start to break it down, right? Just gonna have some water. Hope you're following me okay. Hope I'm making sense. Okay. So you have this damaged tonsil. You have now secondary strep. And this poisons everything. So now you're further poisoning the body with the antibiotics, and you're getting rid of the microbiome. And then this can lead to mitral valve stenosis or prolapse in the heart, because the strep will go there next, right? They'll go to the next warm space. And the heart valve is damaged often by the way, if you understand some of the nature of the anatomy of the heart, it's the most common valve to get first hit by poison. So it's worn down quicker. Okay, so like this is one such example of how vaccines cause damage, and we have thousands of such examples of how vaccines cause damage. This is why it's an insane gambit that's going on here. Just from the science itself, from the vaccine failures itself, from the diseases it causes, and the witness and the deaths and the families being destroyed, and the whole theory is also bunk. And then you have the whole history behind it. It falls apart. It falls completely apart. And if you still, after hearing that, still think vaccines are safe and effective, then there's something seriously, seriously wrong with your thinking, or you're in deep cognitive dissonance, okay? And you need help. Okay, so now I want to go into what my book is going to, on my first, so the book is going to be written into different books, so I'll have book one kind of thing. So book one is going to be this. So basically, after studying cults extensively and understanding how they're run and understanding their design, and then realizing that the medical mafia was run as a cult, I'm comparing and contrasting this for you so that you can see it. Okay? So what we have in a cult is a leader that creates the rules and the structure. So you always are going to have a top-down system, okay, a pyramidal system. You have leaders that design the rules and that are that have followers. And the leader is usually, in bona fide cults, they're very magnetic. They're very magical people. They're very alluring. They have something that je ne sais quoi quality about them. They're psychopaths. And so psychopaths can fool people very easily because they believe they're crap themselves, right? So they're very, they come off very loving, they come off very concerning, but they're full-blown narcissists. In the medical system, that hierarchy we have the AMA and the CDC, and we have the licensing bodies. So all the dictation comes from the leadership, comes from the bullies, if you will, comes from the authority, right? You don't question the authority. So that's the authority. Then we have the next level down. We have the mid-level handlers, which are the controllers. They're the ones that are, after a period of time when you're in a cult, you graduate, because if you continue to be in the favor of the leader, or you continue to all the right things and you make all the right connections within the cult society, you get more freedom because they feel that you're less of a threat. You're not going to ask questions. You're not going to expose the leadership. You're not going to do anything that would destabilize. You're brainwashed in that, and you are supportive of it because it's your whole life. It's what you know. Okay, so they're the real problem. They're if that portion falls apart, the whole cult falls apart, even if the leader is still there, mostly. So these are the doctors. These are the nurses. And I argue it's also Big Pharma, as it's so lovingly called, which is a conglomerate of a few mega corporations, which, by the way, used to be illegal to have monopolies like that, so now it's fine, I guess. But anyway, so I would say Big Pharma is both the leadership and in the controlling section, because it has its fingers in all the pies, because it depends on this medical model and the corporate model to really feed and fuel everything. So it does have its place in both, okay, because it's also considered an authority, believe it or not. But it is the controller. It does control things, very much so. Okay, So another factor in a cult, another telltale sign of a cult, is that you're not allowed to question the leadership. If you question the leadership or challenge the leadership, you go down in rank and you are punished. There's different types of punishments that can ensue. They can be subtle, they can be overt, they can be physical, depends on the cult. In the medical system, you get a board review, and if you don't pass the board review, or basically where they say smarten up or you're going to get in more trouble, then your license is revoked, right? You get in trouble that way. Like Dr. Carolyn Dean can speak to that because she's an MD and an ND, and a brilliant woman, totally awake, and she went through horrible torture and board reviews and licensing issues when she began to expose what was going on, and she still exposes it to this day. You know, and so she can speak to that from her own experience of what she went through to, you know, extract herself from the cult. Okay, so then another feature of cults is obviously mind control tactics are used. I mean, if there wasn't mind control, then people would have their own minds, right? So there has to be certain tactics of mind control. In the book, I'll go into mind control more. I don't really have a lot of time to go into it here in this discussion. But some of the mind control tactics are, at first, they're love bombed. So how I show the love bombing in the medical system is first, or even pre-med. It starts in pre-med, and then it just bleeds over into first-year med school. First-year med school is like an orgy of love bombing. It is, your ego is fluffed. You are told that you are so brilliant, that you are more brilliant than anybody else, that you wouldn't be here if you weren't brilliant. You wouldn't be a doctor if you weren't the most intelligent person on the earth. You know, you are just applauded on every level. You are told how special you are. Basically, you're told everything that you've ever wanted to hear from your parents, you know, or your lover. It's like everything you've ever wanted to hear anyone ever say to you, they kind of say it to you. You're special, you're desired, you're wanted, you're brilliant, you're the everything, right? That's what they do. And I witnessed that, and I was scary to witness. It's like going to I don't know, like Anthony Robbins. No, I'm not saying he's a cult. Well, in a sense, he's a cult of personality. But I'm saying that, you know, it's like going to an Anthony Robbins seminar where you're just clapping and, oh my God, it's just to get you right there, right? So get the ego fluffed. They do certain types of indoctrination of belief. Obviously, that has to happen. They're beliefs that are repeated. So how you continue to make sure that things are parroted is you have to keep repeating it. As a practitioner, as a teacher in these schools, you just keep repeating yourself. So indoctrination through repetitiveness, through repeating. Or you'll see politicians do it when they're trying to brainwash people, like with the terrorism thing. They'll say terrorism, 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 like 1,000 times. They keep saying the same word over and over. It's a mind control tactic. And so they do it with the vaccines. Vaccines mind control tactic is safe and effective, safe and effective, safe and effective, right? So that's the one that they tend to use. And in school, it's all different kinds of levels of that. But I'll get into that more when I write the book. Okay. So the other thing that is done in cults is they capture and use all your resources, your money, your energy, and your time. Traditionally in cults, they deprive them. The food is really low level, so they're kind of starving. They're really weakened by the process. They have large volumes of information to absorb and learn, like in Scientology. Scientology is classic for this. They have to read incredible amounts of information. So they have to go to work during the day, and then at night they have to go home and study all this bull crap, which is they're brainwashing themselves, right? So that's it. And so in med school, you've got lots of expenses. It's very expensive. Your long hours at school, and then at home you have to just continue to study. Often you're studying in study groups well into the late hours. You're getting up really early to attend all the labs or whatever. We do cadaver lab, and we do, there's lots of things you have to experience. You have to do clinic work, right? So it's tiring. You have to buy all the books and the materials, and you're constantly being sold things and shiny toys and stuff. I mean, you're all in, right? Like that's your time, your energy, your resources. And what else happens is because you're so busy is that, and cults do this on purpose, so cults have to isolate you from your friends and family. They have to. So either they'll pull you into a live-in cult, or in the case of like Scientology, they're your family. They become your family. They become your friends. And you lose any connection to the outside world or outside family and friends because they just don't understand what you're going through. You're only going to understand your colleagues because you're going through this together, right? You're having a together type of experience. So you're bonding. So you have this social bonding going on, and you start to lose these connections. So you're too busy to communicate with them. You maybe go out for like a birthday or something like that, but you really don't have a lot of social interaction. So you're really losing touch with reality, okay? So that's key for a cult. You're spending most of your time with other cult members. So now you're starting to form those bonds. You're starting to, maybe you're in residency, maybe you're in the dorms. You're all day with the same people, right? You're really starting to spend lots and lots of time with all the same people, and there's an interpersonal dynamic now that's established within that. You start to learn who people are, who are the ones who are, more competitive, and so forth. You learn the ones that you don't like versus like. You create even maybe intimate relationships with these people, right? Like you start to date or even marry them. And this does happen. This happens in med school all the time. The other thing that is classic with cults is you get a unique language or a lingo. You have a special language or a special way of communicating with that group. It makes you feel special and unique, and it makes you feel that you're better than other people or different than other people. And so obviously we see in the medical world there's medical jargon. And we learn all kinds of shorthand that's very special that nobody else can read, so no one else can read the prescription properly, all kinds of little secret language and or very verbose types of language that is just over someone else's head, right? So it has a few things. It isolates you further from other people. It's very isolating, but it also helps you bond more, again, with that subgroup. So it pulls you harder into the cult and makes you more interested in the cult and investing into it. Then another factor in cults is obviously removing the ability of free thinking. You have to destabilize the self-awareness and the authenticity of that person. You have to give them a new identity. You can't have them being them. Because if they're them, then they're going to be them. They're going to be authentically them. But if they're wearing a mask, then they're going to become the mask, and that's exactly what happens. So with obviously all the large information that they're ingesting, it changes your thinking, it changes what your belief systems are, and all of that. But you start to identify with who you are as a cult member. So in the medical world, obviously you start to wear the costume, right? So every cult has a costume. And so you start to learn that your identity is this costume, right? The white coat. In cults, they always have the same similar dress. You'll see them do their hair similarly, all that kind of stuff. So that's all part of this groupthink kind of behavior and fitting in and making sure you're part of the group, right? Because you don't want to be ostracized. You want to be rewarded in just so a way. You want to make sure that you fit in, okay? And the amount of memorization and regurgitation that has to be done in the medical world, obviously it's rewarded, right? So if you can memorize and regurgitate, the better you can memorize and regurgitate the information, the higher the marks you get. So you're rewarded for that. So you're not rewarded so much for free thinking or your own theories and ideas. You're rewarded for regurgitation of what exactly they have told you to say. And that's the highest mark you can get. And so this is what happens when they get out of medical school is they're parrots. They've become parrots to the information. They've been the psychology of the reward is with them, so they have a positive dopamine hit when they get it right. Like, so this is creates a type A personality. This creates a perfectionist that, if you get it right, you get a dopamine surge like a drug. So you get a high off of being right. So you always want to be right. That sets you up for arrogance and it sets people up for, needing that recognition, needing that authority and craving it more. So basically they're turning them into addicts. Okay. Rewards are given for leadership. You praise compliance. Always compliance is praised, and negative behavior obviously is shunned. They have ceremonies and rituals in med school that, parade around the best of the best, right? So there's extra reward for really following along with cult ideology. You get perks. There's backroom deals, like when you graduate here, you can work for me, or I'll do this for you. There's all types of social interworkings and going on that are very deep and quite subliminal in some cases. And you have positioning and promising going on. And then you have pharmaceutical gift giving. So then after first year, even in first year, it's more, I found it, at least in naturopathic college, it was a bit more gentle in first year. And that really got hot and heavy, where all the companies that sell the products that you're going to pimp for them, like in naturopathic college, it's a lot of the supplements and the nutraceuticals, and then in med school, it's all the drugs, right? So they give you stuff for free. They love you. They love bomb you. They give you all kinds of gifts. In med school, it's over the top. They give like trips and whatever else. I don't even want to know what else, to be honest. So all of these types of reward systems for good behavior. So that makes you want to stay in the cult. So everyone else, this is a factor of cults. When you're in that group, everyone else outside of the cult is considered either evil or bad or trying to trick you to get out of the cult. They're not really there for you. They're not really there to help you. They are the ones that are never going to come into enlightenment or never going to find salvation. They're very much considered less than at best and evil at worst, right? So that's what I was mentioning earlier about, how their egos are fluffed in first year and how special and smart they are. And that continues on, but it's really pronounced that they are told that the patient is stupid, basically. The patient doesn't need to know about the vaccine ingredients. They wouldn't even understand them even if you told them, they're that dumb. Like, you just tell them what to do because they're too stupid and they're just going to hurt themselves. So just don't even, the information without intellect, they're just going to hurt themselves with it, so just don't even bother. That's what they do in med school. That's why they're so arrogant. They think that you're really, really dumb and that you don't know anything, and that the internet is the outside evil too, right? They always say, oh, did you go find that on the internet? They're condescending to you. They say, like, you could never independently research something. I went to med school. I paid all this money for it. I did all this amazing stuff. You couldn't be like me. You're an idiot. How dare you bring this information to me from the evil internet, right? Again, I hear these stories all the time. People come to me and say, I gave, my doctor this information that's actually science that proves that this is, dangerous. And they, threw it back to me, wouldn't read it, and told me that not to trust the internet. That's what they said, This is the kind of thing coming from so-called intelligent people. It's really, really quite ostentatious. Okay, so we talked about the white coats. We talked about, so lack of logic and common sense. This is the twisted logic, which I touched on with the woman with the shoe, right? They have a very twisted logic. They have a roundabout way. So because they're brainwashed to think that vaccines are safe and effective, that means they cannot be non-safe and ineffective. That's not allowed. They can't think that. That cognitive dissonance is too strong. So they will make up, this is the one I heard lately. This is crazy. So a mother, takes her child to the doctor, unfortunately, gets a vaccine, unfortunately. The child doesn't stop screaming and is having hyperventilation and all kinds of problems, right? 2 days of this, by the time she can get back into the office. This happened immediately, but she couldn't get back to the doctor. She had to book an appointment, right? So she had to wait 2 days. Goes back to the doctor, and the doctor actually said that it was because she was breastfeeding the child and that the breast milk was interfering with the processing of the vaccine, and that's what was causing the problem. Okay? Do you see how insane these people are? This is insanity. That is bona fide insanity, that they would even say such a thing. that breast milk is causing the screaming and hyperventilating of an infant that just got a vaccine 2 days ago. It's just insane. It is. It's like clinically insane. Like I could look that up in the DSM. That's what I'm saying when I say insane. It's textbook insane. Okay, so lack of logic and common sense. So that requires thinking, right? And they're very confused because throughout medical school you get constant micro-abuse. Your authentic self, your authentic voice is suppressed. You're not allowed to speak out. You're not allowed to question, or at least only a little, right? And if you are, you're punished. So you get this abuse coming back, right, where you're not allowed to do that. So you kind of feel like suppressed. You're walking around traumatized, and you're traumatized from school anyway because that is not natural. The way that schools are designed is not a natural way of learning. It's not even really that much of a helpful way of learning. It's not experiential. It's a horrible way to pound information into someone's head. It's not even, after you get out, people get out of med school, they don't know anything. They feel like they don't know anything. They're scared to practice because they feel like they don't know who they are. They don't know what this society is anymore. And they're just totally, they don't even know how to apply anything. Everything comes in practice. And so they're shoved out the door and they're totally lost because they don't know who they are and they've been tortured for 4 years or longer. So that loss of identity is a big one. They got their new identity, though. They got their pretty little, like I got one on my wall that says I'm a naturopathic doctor, all pretty little certificate, all shiny and so forth, my name on it, yada, yada. It's in a frame. Yay for me, right? Like, oh, now you're something. Now you've got a diploma. You've accomplished. Okay, I'm going to say, sure, it's an accomplishment. I get it. Like you've done a lot there. But my point is that becomes the identity now. This is who I am. Is that piece of paper on the wall, right? After you go through that many years of it, you've really lost your sense of self. And a lot of people, they go on vacation there, they travel, they try to find themselves again after school. They're desperate to, right? They're depressed. They're broke. They're trying to find a practice. They're stumbling around, They're just trying to figure out this world now. And then the truth really starts to come on to them that they don't really know much of anything. And then they try to suppress that mostly because then they can't cope. So they take the truth and they twist it to their agenda. So these are there's many more, but I'm running out of time. So this is what we're really up against here. We have a medical world rife with imposters. They're cult members. They're ill. They're ill people. I just see them as victims, really. I'm angry because they're hurting our children. They're hurting generations of people. They're degrading our DNA. They're doing all kinds of damage, and they're not paying attention for the most part. And that is angering. I get that. And it's okay. That's healthy. There's healthy anger, and we can have healthy anger, But the extra insanity of manipulating statistics, like what happened at the beginning of vaccines, right? It was sanitation and plumbing and so forth that was coming in and reducing disease rates because the terrain was getting stronger for people. And then the vaccine industry just manipulated statistics and made it look like it was the vaccines that did it. I mean, that's an outright lie. And most people don't even know that. I mean, the level of fraud is like a humongous layered cake. There are just so many layers to the deception. It's outrageous. I wanted to talk on, because I did talk about this yesterday, and I just wanted to touch on the polio vaccine because one of the people like the polio one, eh? Like when you go, so vaccines are, true quackery and they're fraudulent, so forth. And you say that to people, they go, well, polio, right? They love the polio one. They always go there. They go to measles and they go to polio, but they sure love polio, and they just don't know a damn lick about polio. I mean, it's laughable. Like they'll always point, the embedded in the propaganda through all the media, your TV and your newspaper. If you're watching TV and newspaper, you're being mind controlled. You can't do that. You have to walk away from it. You have to clear your mind. You won't think straight. But they show that, the picture of the room with all the iron lungs and the nurses, the little cute hats walking around, right, and the little doctor with the bow tie, like the black and white picture, right, of polio and the iron lungs and woo, right? But they don't know anything about that, like what caused that. So I just wanted to touch on the truth about polio here quickly, and then we'll wrap it up. So the history of polio, okay? So that's called the Cutter incident. That's that iron lung picture that everybody refers to. And so the Cutter incident, people will say, well, people were, having polio, and this is the iron lungs were saving them, and, thank God for that, right? But what they don't realize is that this is one of the biggest con jobs ever done into their face, right? So, okay, here's what happened. In the 1800s, they made this pesticide. It's called Paris green. It's called something else now. I'm going to look this up and find out what the common name is, because they're still using it. They actually still use this. They actually still use DDT too. Did you know that? Just in other countries, because who cares, right? Who cares about their health? We know that it causes birth defects and animal deaths, but let's just sell it to unsuspecting other people, and then we'll just pretend that we got rid of it. They didn't get rid of it, and they didn't get rid of Paris green either. So it was a green liquid. Okay, obviously it had copper and arsenic and lead in it, basically. So it's one of those heavy metals. Heavy metals are the most toxic materials on Earth to the body. Yeah, that includes mercury, and that includes aluminum. And that's the other joke about, just an aside that I didn't mention, that's a joke about calling things a green vaccine. You can't take adjuvants out and have any kind of titer. They won't work. They won't do what the vaccine, to get an action on the body, to get a reaction, it has to be poison. So they have to have the heavy metal in it. If they take it out, it's not going to do anything. They'll say it doesn't work. They'll never go for it. They're just wasting their time and money trying to push for this bullcrap that will never fly, because it'll never give a titer, because that's the gold standard to say that the vaccine is working, is the gold standard of the titer. You know what a titer really is? A titer is a measure of infection. So if you have a titer in your blood of a so-called, bacteria, virus, whatever, that denotes infection. It doesn't denote immunity. I mean, that is pure conjecture that they do there, that they actually tell you that you're immune to it when you have a titer. No, it means they infected you and now you have an infection. So I won't get into boosters and all the bull crap about vaccine failures. You can see that in my note. I post all the vaccine failures there in my note. All the highest populations of vaccinated people get measles. They're the ones that get measles, or they're vaccinated for it. So, I mean, it's just all fail on every level, and it's insane, and it's a huge amount of insanity. Okay, so this pesticide, back to polio, it causes neurological damage. It causes organ failure. It gives all of these horrible symptoms, yeah. And so guess what happens when you get heavy metal poisoning? You get neurological damage. Oh, isn't that funny? In the brain, because it passes the blood-brain barrier. They get more lungs, heart are really attacked, the nerves, they can't walk properly, right? They can't breathe. Their lungs are poisoned. But guess what happens? Well, people who would get so-called polio, it only happened in the summer months, because that's when they were spraying. President Roosevelt, so-called, had polio, right? He was paralyzed. But he was paralyzed by Paris green, because he would go to a location where they had apple orchard, where they would spray these industrial chemicals on the apple orchards. They were using Paris green, and he was exposed to it. And so he got poisoned by Paris green at a summer retreat, and that's what happened to him. And then they made him a poster boy for polio. Poor guy, he should have just got the vaccine. He would have been fine. I mean, wow. So this came out. So Dr. Ralph Scobie, Dr. Morton Biskind, they both testified in front of U.S. Congress in 1951. Go to your history. They testified that the paralysis going on, that everyone's calling polio, was actually being caused by this poison, and that the virus theory was purposely fabricated by the chemical industry, and that governments were on board with that to deflect litigation away from both parties. Okay? That was whistleblower, probably one of the earliest whistleblowing experiences right there. Okay? So here we have an exposure in Congress saying that no, polio doesn't exist. It's not a virus. It was a made-up theory to get these guys, in the safe zone from their scam. Okay. So now the AMA, so a few years later, 5 years later, they changed they said you can't call polio anymore. If you if you call polio as polio, your license to practice will be terminated. So here's the cult coming in, changing the rules, which is another cult phenomenon. They always keep changing the rules, so you don't know what's what. Like doomsday cults always just keep changing the date of the doomsday. Doomsday will pass, they'll just make a new date kind of thing, okay? So this is come down from the cult leader. And they said now you have to call any paralysis acute flaccid paralysis, or you can call it MS, you can call it Bell's palsy, MD, cerebral palsy, ALS, Lou Gehrig's, right, Guillain-Barré, meningitis. Call it anything except polio. So this was orchestrated to make people believe that polio was totally eradicated. It's gone. It's over. You've been bamboozled, guys. I don't know what else to say. I mean, I do know what else to say. I could talk for like a gazillion years on this topic, but I'm saying, you know what I mean? Like, if this doesn't get to you, if this doesn't convince you, then there's nothing that will, you know, because this is the truth of it.
Amanda Vollmer, we have a caller. I don't want to cut you off at all, but I do want the caller to address you. We all have 3 minutes left. I'm interviewing Amanda Vollmer, naturopath. You can go to her website at yummymummyapothecary.com. I am your host, Sally L. Cordy. You can find me at Vaccine Free NYC on Facebook and Twitter. And now we pick up the caller. Hello, caller. Who's this?
Oh, hi. I was just listening to the show. The topic I'm very interested in because I have young children, so I was just listening in.
Hasn't it been amazing? Great. I've learned so much. Amanda, I have a question. I am afraid I may have an ego, and I don't want to have an ego, you know, because I fight so hard against this that if I didn't completely believe in what I'm doing, I could never pull it off. How do you diffuse the ego part of it?
Yeah, it's a very good question. We can never get rid of the ego. The ego is our personality, right? There's the ego and then there's a super ego. And really what it's about is, my spiritual teachers used to say we put aspects of the ego into the morgue. We kind of put them down a little. We become aware of ourselves and we become aware of our triggers, and we want to utilize the ego in a healthy way. So there's healthy ego and unhealthy ego. So if you look at it more like that, then it's a little more helpful as opposed to, we're not going to obliterate the self. That's the whole problem we have here is people don't know who they are. It's important to know who you are, and you're passionate about this topic, you're vocal about this topic, and you need that healthy level of ego in order to be brave enough to speak outwardly and to communicate to people. So it works for you. But there's obviously going to be triggers and things that make us spiral, and that's the aspect of the ego or the shadow aspects that we want to identify in ourselves in a loving way. And then, do the opposite of that. Like if we do the opposite is how you control it. So, basically if you feel there's actually teach a course on it.
Thank you, my friend, and an honored guest, Amanda Vollmer, for a truly remarkable program. I hope to.
Thank you so much.
I hope you will come to New York City and give a lecture. I would be delighted to promote such an activity. So let me know about that, or caller. And to Janice Hicks, last but not least, to Janice Hicks for turning me on to you. Cheerio, my friends.
Thank you so much. Very much blessed. Have a good night.